For more than a decade, Metrolinx, Ontario's regional agency in charge of transit coordination in the Greater Toronto and Hamilton area, has been planning, consulting, and yes, building infrastructure. Now, as it sets out on a $34 billion expansion plan, it's got a new president and chief executive officer. He is Phil Verster, formerly managing director of rail services in the United Kingdom. He joins us now to talk transportation in the province of Ontario. Nice to meet you.
Good evening, Steve.
Welcome to this side of the pond.
Thank you very much.
You led Scotland's passenger rail service operator called ScotRail. You worked in England, you worked in Ireland. I'd like to, just by way of background, to get a better understanding of what you thought were your and your staff's best accomplishments when you were over there.
Well, Steve, thanks for that. Yeah, and in the railway in the United Kingdom, we brought a lot of continuous improvement and focus on safety and just on how to run services better to businesses such as Network Rail, Irish Rail in my time over in Ireland. And in Scotland, we did innovative things, very innovative things, where we formed a joint team of a public sector company and a private sector company. And we fixed quite a lot of the problems that exist between railways that have traditionally been segregated between who operates and who maintains. And those are all exciting initiatives, and achieve those mostly and nearly always with a focus on how you engage your people, because these industries are all very people intensive.
I'm pretty up on the English accent and the Irish accent, and that doesn't sound, and the Scottish accent for that matter, and yours doesn't sound like any of them.
No.
Where are you from?
I hail originally from Cape Town in South Africa.
I thought so. That's what that sounded like.
And grew up by the sea and all of the good stuff in South Africa.
Okay. You ever heard of a guy named Andy Byford?
Oh, Andy is a really good friend of mine.
Andy runs the Toronto Transit Commission, of course.
He does.
What did you do with him?
So, during my time down in London, one of the train operating companies failed, and they drafted in a turnaround team. Andy was part of that team, I was part of that team, and for 3 years we turned that Southeastern Railways back into a profitable business, and we had adjacent offices with a very thin wall between us.
And he is a Brit.
Oh, yes, he is.
That
yes.
accent I recognize. Okay. One of the most noticeable differences, just obvious superficial differences, between ScotRail and GO Transit, which you are now responsible for in some ways, is that ScotRail carries almost 25 million more passengers per year than does GO Transit. Does that suggest that the Metrolinx job you're about to jump into is an easier job than the one you came from?
I don't think so.
How come?
While ScotRail carried more passengers, it's a totally different type of network with a totally different type of maturity. And what we have here in Toronto is a centerpiece in investment in the world. There are very few parts of the world where the investment into rail transit as well as bus transit is so focused and just so exciting. So if you think of it this way, in the next 5-6 years, we are going to quadruple our services. Quadruple. So take from 1,500 trains a week to 6,000 trains a week. So this is really exciting. And that 68 million footfall and passenger riders will go up very significantly.
We actually have a graphic to emphasize what you've just said. Sheldon, why don't we put this up now? Bottom of page 2, stat board 1. Here's what's part of your $34 billion worth of growth. Expanding and electrifying parts of GO Transit, including, as you suggested, quadrupling the number of GO trips from 1,500 a week to 6,000. That's by the year 2025. And it won't just be planning transit, but also building and operating transit. In terms of building, and that means new LRTs, light rail lines, in Toronto, Hamilton, and Mississauga. The obvious question is, no one's done this here ever before. What makes you think you can?
So in my background in the United Kingdom, granted the network is much more mature, there's still an ongoing drive to enhance the network, to electrify the network. In ScotRail, we had a rolling program of electrification where we were taking really critical lines, such as the Glasgow to Edinburgh line, and electrifying these lines. Because electrified lines fits better with the environment, gives a lot of economic benefits, and it's really good for the long-term investment. And I think the real thing here, Steve, is that these transit businesses run on two core things. Customer focus, and I would like to say customer focus 3 times in a row, it's that important, and safety. And I would like to put safety about 6 times in a row when you talk about safety. And when you get those 2 things right, and you have the DNA to run a railway and to run a bus operation with safety and customer focus, you are going to get most of your answers right.
Safety, obviously, hugely important. People want to know when they get on the train, they're going to make it to the other end A-OK. Punctuality, though, is a problem that we hear about all the time, both on the Toronto Transit Commission, which you're not responsible for, but on the services that Metrolinx offers, which you are. There were criticisms about punctuality back in Scotland as well. What were the problems back there?
Yeah, so Steve, I'm very proud of what we've achieved in Scotland. Over many years preceding our formation of that alliance, the punctuality of the services had been declining due to congestion effects and due to investments on the railway. And we set the foundation in terms of an operating plan to address those types of issues. And till the day that I left in February and moved on to a different challenge, punctuality made a turnaround and started to improve. This is the type of thing that we have. We are very much in the public eye. The public is very, and rightly so, very intent to travel on time. That's a reasonable expectation, and that's a must, that we always endeavour to get punctuality right.
The Scotland Rail job, how many years were you there?
2 years.
Why so few?
I was asked to take on a different challenge. And the challenge I was asked to take on was to build a new railway between Oxford and Cambridge, our top 2 universities in the UK, and a railway that was somewhere in the 60s discontinued. It's called the Silicon Valley, really, of the United Kingdom, had the highest priority as an economic zone in the UK. And I was asked to go and take that on. Given
how booming the UK, in London in particular, is right now, why leave all of that and come here?
Well, good question. I had to think very carefully about that. And when I went through the interview, I actually said to the panel, I said, I'm not really sure I should leave the job I'm doing because it was a great job. It's very interesting, very exciting. But, having looked at the Toronto Challenge is superb. And what is so exciting about what we're doing in Toronto is it's not just about building more infrastructure. It is actually about an incredible focus that we can bring to connecting communities through doing other things right, such as integrated fares, for example, which is a huge opportunity to change patterns of travel, patterns of usage, and to get what I call sort of a network effect going.
Integrated between what and what?
Integrated between the 10 odd transit authorities, 10 if you add GO in, but an integrated fare for TTC, for GO, for Brampton, for Hamilton, for Mississauga.
They've all got different governance systems and different boards and so on.
That's the challenge. That's the beauty. That's the challenge.
Okay, let me put to you, and I know you know this already, but we're going to have some fun with this one here. Here is some of the political crap you're about to step into, Phil. Are you ready for this? It's recently been revealed, the Toronto Star did a whole series on this, that the Minister of Transportation for the province of Ontario essentially pressured Metrolinx, your organization, to build GO stations in Kirby, which is in Vaughan, and Lawrence East, which is in Scarborough, even though the Metrolinx experts suggested those were unnecessary. And it was, it seemed the obvious conclusion to draw was that this was political interference, trumping sort of, nuts and bolts information and good, hard, concrete studies.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about all that?
Right. I think the lines are really clear. Metrolinx has a board that is defined in the Metrolinx Act. As transit specialists, it is our responsibility to give transit solutions that are agnostic to politics, agnostic to policy, that are true transit-specific, domain knowledge specialist answers. And it needs to be intelligent answers, and it needs to give elected representatives an opportunity to make choices. And so it's not just give a menu and let people choose. It must be give a menu, but sort of suggest what is first course, second course, and last course, and what's the wine that should go with it to get the best outcome. But we should give choices, and the decisions should then be made by elected officials.
They should?
Absolutely, because we can provide advice, but elected representatives make policy decisions, and they are elected on a mandate from the electorate. That's what democracy is about.
They have a habit, though, and I don't say this with any negativity, it's just the way it is. They have a habit of favoring that which favors their constituents. The Minister of Transportation at the moment represents a riding in York Region, and therefore, surprise, surprise, transportation is going to do very well on his watch in York Region, maybe at the expense of other places where there is a better case by the facts. Does that not offend you?
So when we look at how transit solutions in many jurisdictions work, is that when we have programs and projects, we have a phasing of business cases that lives with the program. In the initial phase, you have a business case based on the initial visibility of facts, requirements, what's the land use decisions that pertain at the time. And as you get the initial business case into the second phase, the richness of the information and the modeling becomes better. You can make a better decision. And that's what we're doing. With all of those contentious business cases, we're taking them through a process to develop the business cases that brings us to the last decision, which would be go, no go, and that'll be at business case stage 3 before we do a post-program business review. So yeah, I know what you're picking up on, and I know what the issue is. But in the end, Steve, I'm answerable to my board. My board is an independent board, and I'll take guidance from my board.
Who appoints the board?
The board is appointed by...
The provincial government.
Well, the chair is appointed by the minister.
Right.
And I am appointed by the minister, and the board has its independence.
The board has its independence, but it's selected by the province of Ontario.
It's configured within the Act to be independent, and the board takes their independence really seriously, Steve. And I think that's really important. And I think we must play to those rules, and that equation is fairly simple.
I appreciate that, but I want to know the next time you're in a private meeting with the Minister of Transportation and he says, I don't care what the facts say, here's what we want, here's what we need, we're the funders, we get to decide. What do you do?
Can I just very strongly say that in all of my meetings with the minister, he has never once had that approach with me. Can I be really clear about that? And the minister is very clear. He has not discussed anything on Lawrence East or Kirby with me at all, and it is fully within our team's judgment to advise on whether Kirby or Lawrence East heads on and how they head on. Now, Lawrence East is a different type of project, obviously, because it's a smart track project.
Smart Track, yeah.
And it's got its own profile, and it's part of Mayor Tory's really good program, I think, on smart track. So it has its own merits and its own criteria. But to be really clear, I think that the incident you referred to, I was obviously clearly not party to it, but I think we're going to manage just well with this.
I'd love to know what that means. We're going to manage just well means...
No, I think I'm going to maintain our domain knowledge independence. That, for me, is the right way to do it, and I'm going to always be clear where I stand on it. Steve, I'm one of those tactless South Africans or Southern Hemisphere people who just say it as it is, and I will continue to do that, and I think that's the right way to do stuff.
Okay, well, on that, just before we get the other guys in here and broaden our discussion, in the Department of Telling It Like It Is, Canadians are known for being extremely polite. You've been out shaking hands with passengers over the last few weeks. When the trains are late, do we live up to the stereotype?
Well, it's been really interesting because meeting with passengers is just part of my psyche. And every time I'm out and this morning, 7 o'clock, I was out on the platforms at Union, just looking and experiencing how busy our platforms are. And I'm worried about how busy our trains are. And we need to do so much more with this investment program to get congestion to a better place. But when I meet with passengers, I am so pleased with the type of feedback we get. I get honest feedback. People aren't holding back. And I sense that most of the issues that we have to contend with aren't as much about punctuality. There's a lot of appreciation for events that can affect train times, but there are loads of questions about Wi-Fi on trains. There are loads of questions about customer information systems on stations.
But are we polite when the trains are late?
I think you are.
We are, right?
I think Canadians are very polite.
Okay.
And I think whenever they see me, they must not hold back please, all of our customers out there, don't hold back when I'm on the train. Tell me what you want to tell me.
Phil, watch out what you wish for. That's what they say.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, thank you for setting the table. More to come in just a second. That's Phil Verster, President, CEO, Metrolinx.
Thank you very much.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.